In the cold void between stars, where civilized species dare not tread without environmental suits and climate-controlled vessels, something impossible happened. A distress beacon pierced through subspace from the mining colony of Kepler 442b, but it wasn't asking for medical supplies or evacuation ships. It was asking for soldiers, warriors, killers. The message was simple: hostile force overwhelming our defenses, requesting immediate military reinforcement. Any species, any method, we pay in refined trilithium. What they didn't know was that their desperate plea had reached a small blue planet on the outer rim, where the dominant species had spent millennia perfecting the art of warfare in the most hostile environment the galaxy had ever produced. A world so dangerous that its inhabitants had to fight just to breathe, eat, and sleep. They called for reinforcements. They were about to meet humanity. The distress signal reached Earth on a Tuesday. Commander Sarah Chen was reviewing supply manifests in the orbital station above Luna when the comm system crackled to life with an encrypted transmission that made absolutely no sense. The universal translator struggled with the alien syntax, producing choppy, fragmented sentences that spoke of death and desperation. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Rodriguez called from his station, his voice tight with confusion. "I'm getting readings on this signal that don't match anything in our xenobiology databases. The source is, well, it's coming from somewhere in the Kepler 442 system." Shen pulled up the stellar charts on her holodisplay. Kepler 442 was one of those systems that the deep space surveys had marked as potentially habitable, but never explored. Too far out, too expensive, and frankly, Earth had bigger problems. The resource wars in the Sol system had only just ended, leaving humanity with a surplus of battle-hardened soldiers and nowhere to send them. "What exactly are they saying, Rodriguez?" The lieutenant tapped his console, and the alien voice filled the command center. Even through the static and translation errors, the desperation was unmistakable. "Unknown vessels, mining operation, they came from below. Killing everything, request immediate military assistance. We'll pay in processed trilithium." Chen's eyebrows shot up. Trilithium was the fuel that made faster-than-light travel possible, and it was rare as diamonds. If some alien mining operation was offering it as payment for military assistance, either they were lying or they were facing something truly horrific. "Get me Admiral Harrison," she ordered. Within minutes, the grizzled face of Admiral Marcus Harrison appeared on her screen. His office aboard the UES Endeavour showed the scars of recent combat, patch marks on the bulkheads, temporary repair panels, the look of a ship that had seen too much action and not enough downtime. "Sarah, please tell me you're calling about something other than another bureaucratic nightmare." "Actually, sir, I think I have something that might interest you. We've received a distress call from an alien species requesting military assistance. They're offering trilithium as payment." Harrison's expression shifted from mild annoyance to sharp attention. "Aliens? As in, first contact aliens?" "That's what I'm thinking, sir. The signal is coming from Kepler 442b. Long-range sensors show signs of industrial activity and what might be weapons discharge, and they specifically asked for military help?" "Yes, sir. The translation is rough, but they mention being under attack by something that came from below, and they're offering processed trilithium for immediate military reinforcement from any species capable of providing it." Harrison leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming against his desk. Chen knew that look. It was the same expression he'd worn before, authorizing the strike on the Martian separatists, before approving the deep space patrol missions, before every decision that had kept humanity safe in an increasingly dangerous galaxy. "How much trilithium are we talking about?" "Unknown, sir, but they mentioned it as if they have significant quantities available for trade." "And what do we know about these attackers?" "Nothing concrete. The alien transmission mentioned that they came from below, which could mean underground or from underwater, or it could be a translation error. Whatever they are, they've apparently overwhelmed the defenses of an entire mining operation." Harrison was quiet for a long moment, staring at something beyond the camera's view. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of command decision. "Sarah, how many of our people are currently between assignments?" Chen pulled up the personnel files. The numbers were staggering. After the end of the resource wars, Earth's military had been left with thousands of highly trained soldiers, pilots, and specialists with nowhere to go. The peace dividend had translated into unemployment for many of the galaxy's most effective warriors. "We have approximately 15,000 combat veterans currently on rotating leave, sir. Another 8,000 in various support roles. The 3rd Marine Division just finished their tour in the asteroid belt, and they're getting restless." "And ships?" "The Wolfpack Squadron just returned from the Titan patrol, 6 corvettes fully equipped and ready for deployment. The heavy cruiser Retribution just finished her refit. We could have a battle group ready to deploy within 72 hours. Harrison nodded slowly. Do we have any idea what we might be facing out there? No, sir. But given that an apparently advanced civilization is desperate enough to offer their most valuable resource for military assistance, I'd say we should prepare for the worst. The Admiral's smile was grim and entirely predatory. Sarah, I want you to put together a full expeditionary force. Marines, naval support, everything we can spare. If these aliens need military assistance, they're about to discover what happens when you call for help from a species that evolved on a death world. Sir, shouldn't we try to establish diplomatic contact first? Standard first contact protocols? Harrison's laugh was harsh. Sarah, they didn't call for diplomats. They called for killers. And humanity has had 10,000 years to perfect the art of killing things that want to kill us. If these aliens are facing something that has them offering trilithium for military support, then diplomacy is probably already off the table. Chen nodded, already pulling up deployment schedules and personnel assignments. What's our rules of engagement, sir? Simple. We help them deal with whatever is attacking them, we secure payment, and we make sure that everyone in that system understands that humanity is not to be trifled with. This could be our first real contact with alien civilization, Sarah. Let's make sure it's memorable. Within 6 hours, the call had gone out across Earth's military networks. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Veterans who had been fighting boredom and unemployment suddenly had purpose again. The prospect of alien contact, real combat, and significant payment had every warrior in the Sol system volunteering for deployment. Captain Maria Santos was cleaning her sidearm in her quarters aboard the UES Retribution when the deployment order came through. She had spent the last 3 months on leave trying to readjust to civilian life and failing miserably. The resource wars had ended, but the warriors who fought them were having trouble finding their place in peacetime. The mission briefing was unlike anything she had ever received. Alien contact, unknown hostile force, possible trilithium payment, combat deployment to a system none of them had ever heard of. Santos, her commanding officer, Colonel James Mitchell, called as she entered the briefing room. Good to see you're ready to get back to work. The briefing room was packed with personnel she hadn't seen since the siege of Europa. Hard-faced veterans, specialists in warfare that most civilized species couldn't even imagine. The kind of people who had spent their entire adult lives learning how to survive and kill in the most hostile environment known to exist. All right, people, Mitchell began, pulling up a holographic display of the Kepler 442 system. Here's what we know. We received a distress call from an alien mining operation on Kepler 442b. They're under attack by unknown hostiles and they're offering processed trilithium for immediate military assistance. The room buzzed with conversation. Trilithium meant serious money, enough to set up every person in the room for life. What do we know about the aliens? Asked Sergeant Cooper, a demolitions expert who had spent 5 years fighting in the Martian tunnels. Almost nothing. The translation is rough, but they appear to be a mining civilization with some level of advanced technology. They've been overwhelmed by whatever is attacking them. And the hostiles? Unknown. The aliens mentioned that they came from below, which could mean anything. Underground, underwater, subterranean, or it could be a translation error entirely. Lieutenant Park, a former reconnaissance specialist, raised her hand. Sir, what's our intel on the planetary environment? Mitchell pulled up the survey data. Kepler 442b is what we would classify as a paradise world. Temperate climate, abundant water, breathable atmosphere with slightly higher oxygen content than Earth standard. Gravity is about 80 to 5% of Earth normal. By all accounts, it's one of the most habitable planets ever discovered. The room went quiet. Every person in that briefing had been born and raised on Earth, a planet that tried to kill its inhabitants every single day. Radiation, extreme weather, predators, disease, toxic atmospheres, crushing gravity. Humanity had survived all of it and learned to thrive. The idea of a paradise world was almost foreign to them. So, Santos said slowly, we're going to help aliens who live on a paradise world deal with something that has them scared enough to offer trilithium for military assistance. That's the situation, Mitchell confirmed. Staff Sergeant Williams, a veteran of the outer system conflicts, shook his head. Colonel, I've got to ask. If these aliens live on a world that's basically perfect, and they're still getting their asses kicked by whatever is attacking them, what makes Command think we can do better? Mitchell's smile was cold and entirely without humor. Williams, has it occurred to you that maybe the reason they can't handle this threat is precisely because they live on a paradise world? They've never had to fight for survival. They've never had to adapt to constant danger. Never had to develop the kind of reflexes and instincts that come from living on a planet that wants to kill you every single day. The room was silent as the implications sank in. These aliens called for military assistance, Mitchell continued. They're about to discover what happens when you ask for help from a species that learned warfare fighting dinosaurs, plague, ice ages, and each other for 100,000 years. They're about to meet Death Worlders. The deployment timeline was aggressive, 72 hours to prepare, load, and launch a full expeditionary force to an alien system none of them had ever seen. But Earth's military had been built for rapid deployment, and within 60 hours, the battle group was ready. The UES Retribution served as the flagship, accompanied by 6 corvettes of the Wolfpack Squadron and 2 heavy transport ships carrying marines, equipment, and enough firepower to level a continent. The total force numbered just over 3,000 personnel, all volunteers, all veterans of conflicts that had forged them into something that the galaxy had never seen before. As the ships prepared to enter FTL, Commander Chen received one final transmission from the Kepler 442 system. The alien voice was weaker now, more desperate, but the message was clear. Attacking forces broken through our outer defenses, losing ground rapidly. Please, if anyone receives this message, we need help. They're not stopping. They're not taking prisoners. The transmission cut to static. Admiral Harrison's voice came over the ship's communication system as the FTL drives powered up. People of the Expeditionary Force, you are about to become humanity's first ambassadors to alien civilization. You carry with you the hopes and expectations of our entire species. Show them what humans are capable of. Show them what it means to call Earth for help. The ships jumped to hyperspace, carrying 3,000 of Earth's finest warriors toward a first contact that would change everything. The human battle group dropped out of hyperspace, at the edge of the Kepler 442 system 3 days later. And immediately, every sensor on every ship began screaming warnings. Captain Santos stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching the tactical display populate with contacts that made no sense. The system was a battlefield. Debris clouds drifted between planets, the metallic signatures suggesting destroyed spacecraft. Energy readings spiked across multiple frequencies, indicating active weapons fire somewhere in the inner system. Contact Lieutenant Park announced from the sensor station. I'm reading multiple energy signatures from Kepler 442b. Some match the profile we'd expect from mining equipment, but others, she paused, double-checking her readings. Others are completely unknown. Colonel Mitchell joined Santos on the bridge, his expression grim as he studied the displays. Any sign of the aliens who sent the distress call? Picking up what might be a settlement or mining facility on the planet's surface, but the readings are weak. Either they're running on minimal power, or Park didn't finish the sentence. Or they're already dead, Mitchell finished. Admiral Harrison's voice crackled through the communications array from his flagship. All vessels, this is command. We're going in for a closer look. Battle stations, but hold fire unless fired upon. We still don't know what we're dealing with. The human fleet moved into the system in combat formation, sensors reaching out to map the battlefield they were entering. What they found defied everything they thought they knew about warfare. Jesus Christ, Park whispered, her voice barely audible over the bridge's ambient noise. Colonel, you need to see this. She transferred her sensor data to the main display, and the bridge fell silent. The planet's surface was scarred with massive craters, but these weren't impact craters from orbital bombardment. They were perfectly circular, hundreds of meters across, and they appeared to come from below the surface. Those holes, Santos said slowly, they're not going down. They're coming up. Mitchell nodded, his face pale. Whatever attacked these aliens, it came from underground. And judging by the size of those excavations, we're not talking about individual soldiers. We're talking about something massive. The communications array suddenly burst to life with an alien voice, weak but unmistakably desperate. Unknown vessels, please identify yourselves. Are you here to help? The HFY have broken through our final defenses. We cannot hold much longer. Lieutenant Rodriguez, the communications specialist who had first received the distress call, worked frantically to clean up the signal and establish a proper communication link. Unknown alien vessel. This is the United Earth ship Retribution, representing the Human Expeditionary Force. We received your distress call and have come to provide military assistance. Please identify yourself and provide tactical information on the hostile forces. There was a long pause before the alien voice responded, and when it did, it carried a note of something that might have been hope. Humans, we have never heard of your species. I am Research Director Veltar of the Zephyrian Mining Consortium. We have been under attack for 6 days by creatures we call the HFY. They emerged from deep underground and have been systematically destroying our installations. Santos exchanged a look with Mitchell. Neither of them had expected the first alien contact to sound so normal. Veltar could have been any human scientist calling for help. Director Veltar, we need tactical information. What are we facing? The HFY are difficult to describe. They appear to be arthropods, heavily armored, approximately 4 meters in length. They move in coordinated swarms and they seem to be highly intelligent. Our standard defensive weapons have been largely ineffective against their carapaces. How many are we talking about? Our estimates suggest several thousand individuals, possibly more. They have established what appear to be staging areas around our primary mining installations. We believe they may be after our trilithium reserves. Admiral Harrison's voice cut into the conversation from the fleet's command channel. Director Veltar, this is Admiral Harrison, commanding the Human Expeditionary Force. We're prepared to provide assistance, but we'll need coordinates for safe landing zones and a complete tactical assessment. Admiral, I must warn you, these creatures have destroyed everything we've sent against them. Our security forces were equipped with military-grade weapons and they were overrun within hours. Are you certain your people can succeed where we have failed? Santos couldn't help but smile at the aliens' concern. It was almost touching how worried Veltar seemed about their chances. Director, Admiral Harrison replied, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who had spent decades fighting impossible odds. Your people called for military assistance. You're about to discover what happens when you ask for help from a species that evolved fighting everything their planet could throw at them. The human fleet moved into orbital positions around Kepler 442b, and for the first time in days, the humans got a clear look at what they were facing. The planet was beautiful, exactly as advertised, a paradise world with blue oceans, green continents, and a climate that any human would kill to live in. But scattered across the surface were the signs of war. The Zephyrian mining installations were impressive feats of engineering, massive, complex built into mountainsides and coastal regions where they could access both mineral deposits and transportation routes. But many of them were dark now, their lights extinguished, their communication arrays silent, and everywhere, those perfectly circular holes in the ground. I'm reading movement, Park announced, her voice tight with concentration. Multiple contacts emerging from the underground excavations. They're big, Colonel. Really big. The main display shifted to show a real-time image from one of the planet's surface. What emerged from the holes defied easy description. The creatures were indeed arthropods, like massive insects, but they moved with a coordination and intelligence that suggested advanced problem-solving abilities. Their carapaces gleamed like polished metal, and they carried what appeared to be organic weapons that pulsed with bioluminescent energy. They're beautiful, someone whispered from the back of the bridge. They're also trying to kill our new alien friends, Mitchell replied grimly. Lieutenant Park, I want a full tactical assessment. Numbers, movement patterns, weapons capabilities, anything you can give me. As Park worked, Admiral Harrison addressed the entire expeditionary force over the fleet communication system. People of the Human Expeditionary Force, you are looking at humanity's first alien war. The species that call for our help are facing extinction at the hands of creatures that appear to be highly evolved, highly intelligent, and highly dangerous. But remember, they called us because they had nowhere else to turn. They're about to discover what 3 billion years of evolution on a death world can produce. The plan that emerged from the tactical briefings was elegantly simple. The Zephyrians had failed to stop the HFY because they had tried to fight them on the surface, using conventional defensive positions and weapons designed for conflicts between civilized species. The humans would do what humans did best, adapt to the enemy's preferred battlefield and fight dirty. The HFY want to fight underground, Colonel Mitchell explained to his assembled Marines. Fine. We'll take the fight to them. But they've never faced an enemy that evolved in caves, tunnels, and confined spaces. They've never fought something that learned warfare in environments where a single mistake meant death. The landing was unopposed. The HFY seemed uninterested in aircraft or orbital craft, focusing their attention entirely on ground installations. Human dropships landed near the largest remaining Zephyrian facility, where Director Veltar and the last survivors of his people waited. Santos was among the first humans to set foot on an alien world, and her first thought was how easy it was. The gravity was lighter than Earth normal, the air was sweet and clean, the temperature was perfect. It was like stepping into a park. Her second thought was how vulnerable everything seemed. The Zephyrian buildings were constructed with aesthetics in mind, curved walls, artistic flourishes, windows positioned for views rather than defense. Everything about their architecture spoke of a people who had never had to consider that something might want to hurt them. Director Veltar met them at the landing site, and Santos got her first look at an alien. He was humanoid but taller, with elongated limbs and features that suggested a lighter gravitational environment. His skin had a slight blue tint, and his eyes were larger than human standard, adapted for lower light conditions. When he spoke, his voice carried the same desperate hope they had heard over the communications array. "Thank you for coming. I confess, when we sent out the distress call, we never expected anyone to respond, much less arrive so quickly." Admiral Harrison, who had come down with the first wave, studied the alien with the calculating gaze of a career military officer. "Director Veltar, we need to understand what we're facing. Show us these HFY." Veltar led them to an observation post overlooking one of the excavation sites. In the distance, Santos could see the creatures moving in and out of their tunnels. They were larger than the sensor readings had suggested, easily 4 meters long and half that in height, with 6 legs and what appeared to be multiple arms or manipulator appendages. "They began emerging 6 days ago," Veltar explained. "At first we thought it was some kind of seismic event, geological instability from our mining operations. But then they started attacking our facilities systematically. Our security forces tried to establish defensive perimeters, but the HFY simply bypassed them by creating new tunnel entrances behind our lines." Mitchell studied the creatures through binoculars, his expression thoughtful. "What kind of weapons do they carry? Organic projectile weapons of some kind. They appear to fire a concentrated biological compound that can dissolve most materials. Our protective equipment was useless against it." "And your security forces?" Veltar's expression darkened. "We lost contact with them 4 days ago." "The HFY don't appear to take prisoners." Admiral Harrison nodded grimly. "Director, we're going to need you and your people to withdraw to our landing site. We'll establish a secure perimeter and begin operations from there." "What kind of operations?" Harrison's smile was cold and predatory, the kind that humans specialize in. "Director, your people called for military assistance because you were facing an enemy you couldn't understand or defeat. You're about to discover what happens when you call for help from a species that spent 100,000 years learning how to kill everything that wanted to kill them." As the Zephyrians retreated to the human landing site, Santos and her team began their reconnaissance of the battlefield. What they found was a textbook example of asymmetric warfare gone wrong. The Zephyrians had tried to fight a conventional defensive battle against an enemy that refused to follow conventional rules. "Look at this," Sergeant Cooper called from his position near one of the destroyed defensive installations. "They built these bunkers like they were expecting another army to march up and knock politely. No overhead protection, no secondary escape routes, no consideration for enemy tunneling operations." Santos nodded, studying the tactical situation. The HFY had done exactly what any intelligent enemy would do when facing superior firepower. They had changed the rules of engagement. Instead of attacking the defended positions directly, they had simply bypassed them by going underground. "It's like they never heard of siege warfare," Lieutenant Park observed. "They built their defenses assuming the enemy would attack from one direction, with advance warning, following some kind of civilized rules of engagement." "Well," Santos replied, checking her weapon and adjusting her equipment, "they're about to get a demonstration of how warfare works when there are no rules." That night, as the humans prepared for their first engagement with an alien enemy, Director Veltar approached Admiral Harrison with a question that had been troubling him. "Admiral, I must ask, your people seem remarkably calm about the prospect of fighting the HFY. Are you not concerned about casualties?" Harrison looked up from the tactical reports he had been reviewing. "Director, let me ask you something. What's the most dangerous thing on your homeworld?" Veltar considered the question. "Perhaps the HFY storms that occur during the seasonal transitions. They can produce winds up to 80 kilometers per hour. 80 kilometers per hour, Harrison repeated slowly. "On Earth, we call that a moderate storm. Our hurricanes can produce winds of over 300 kilometers per hour. Our tornadoes can reach 500. Veltar's eyes widened in disbelief. "Director," Harrison continued, "humans evolved on a planet that tried to kill us every single day. Weather that could destroy mountains, predators with teeth the size of swords, diseases that could wipe out entire populations, radiation from space, volcanic eruptions, ice ages, asteroid impacts, and we not only survived all of it, we learned to thrive. We didn't just adapt to our environment, we conquered it." The Admiral gestured toward the human encampment, where soldiers were calmly preparing for battle with an alien enemy they had never seen before. These HFY may be the apex predator of their underground ecosystem, but they've never faced anything like humanity. They're about to discover what happens when a species that evolved fighting dinosaurs decides to go to war. As if summoned by Harrison's words, the night was suddenly filled with the sound of chittering, scraping noise that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The HFY were moving, and they were heading toward the human encampment. Santos felt the familiar rush of pre-combat adrenaline as she took her position in the defensive perimeter. Around her, 3,000 human warriors prepared to face their first alien enemy. In the distance, she could see them emerging from the tunnels, hundreds of them, moving in perfect coordination, their organic weapons glowing with bioluminescent energy. "Here they come," she whispered into her communications array. The first alien war was about to begin. The HFY attacked at 0300 hours, emerging from tunnels that appeared faster than seismic sensors could track them. They came in waves, their chittering communication echoing across the landscape as they coordinated their assault with an intelligence that impressed even the veteran human officers. Captain Santos crouched behind her defensive position, watching through night vision optics as the alien creatures approached. They moved unlike anything she had ever encountered. Part insect, part machine, their movements perfectly synchronized as if controlled by a single mind. "Contact front," Sergeant Cooper reported over the communications network. "Range 800 meters and closing." "Jesus, there are a lot of them." Santos adjusted her grip on her rifle and activated her targeting systems. The weapon in her hands was a product of 3 centuries of human warfare, designed to kill efficiently in any environment. But tonight would be its first test against alien armor. "Hold fire," Colonel Mitchell's voice came through her earpiece. "Let them close to optimal range." The HFY advanced in perfect formation, their organic weapons beginning to glow brighter as they prepared to fire. At 600 meters, they stopped and raised their weapons toward the human defensive positions. "Now," Mitchell commanded. 3,000 human weapons opened fire simultaneously. The night exploded into chaos. Tracer rounds streaked through the darkness, guided missiles launched from shoulder-mounted systems, and the deep roar of human artillery filled the air. The HFY formation, which had seemed so impressive moments before, disintegrated under a volume of fire that they had clearly never experienced. But they didn't break. Instead, they adapted. The surviving creatures scattered, using their natural agility to bound between cover points while returning fire with their organic weapons. Where their bioprojectiles struck human equipment, metal began to dissolve with a hissing sound that made Santos's skin crawl. "They're flanking left," Lieutenant Park reported. "Multiple contacts emerging from new tunnel entrances." Santos pivoted to engage the new threats, her training kicking in automatically. The HFY were fast, faster than she had expected, but they moved in predictable patterns. Their tactics, while sophisticated, followed biological imperatives that made them readable to someone who understood hunting and pack behavior. "Suppressive fire on the flanking group," she ordered her squad. "Williams, get your demo team on those tunnel entrances. I don't want any more surprises coming up behind us." Staff Sergeant Williams acknowledged and led his demolitions team toward the newly opened HFY tunnels. As Santos watched, she saw him do something that perfectly encapsulated the human approach to warfare. Instead of trying to seal the tunnels, he rigged them with motion-activated explosives and then retreated to a position where he could monitor them. "If they want to use the tunnels," he reported over the communications network, "they're going to pay a price for it." The battle raged for 3 hours, and gradually the humans began to understand their enemy. The HFY were formidable opponents, intelligent, well-coordinated, and equipped with weapons that could dissolve most conventional materials. But they had evolved in a stable ecosystem where they were the apex predator. They had never faced an enemy that could match their adaptability and exceed their capacity for violence. Director Veltar watched the battle from the human command post, his expression shifting from hope to amazement to something approaching awe. The aliens had been fighting the HFY for 6 days and had been steadily losing ground. The humans had been fighting them for 3 hours and were clearly winning. "How?" he asked Admiral Harrison as they watched human forces systematically dismantle HFY formations. "How are your people so effective against them?" Harrison never took his eyes off the tactical display. "Director, your people fought them like you would fight other Zephyrians, with rules, with expectations of civilized behavior, with the assumption that your enemy would limit themselves to tactics that made sense within your experience." On the display, they could see Sergeant Williams' demo team systematically collapsing HFY tunnels, while Corporal Jackson's sniper teams picked off individual creatures from concealed positions that shouldn't have been tactically viable. "But humans," Harrison continued, "evolved on a planet where everything was trying to kill us. We didn't develop civilization in spite of our violent nature. We developed it because of our violent nature. We learned to cooperate specifically so we could be more effective at destroying threats." A new wave of HFY emerged from a tunnel system nearly a kilometer away from the main battle. Within seconds, human artillery had ranged on their position and begun systematic bombardment. The HFY are magnificent predators, Harrison acknowledged. But they're not warriors. They've never faced an enemy that could outthink them, out-adapt them, and out-violence them simultaneously. As dawn broke over Kepler 442b, the battlefield fell silent. The HFY assault had been broken, their formations scattered, their tunnel networks collapsed or rigged with explosives. Human casualties were minimal, 17 wounded, none killed. HFY casualties were estimated in the hundreds. But Santos knew that this was only the beginning. "Colonel," she reported to Mitchell as she surveyed the aftermath of the battle, "this was a probing attack. They were testing our capabilities, learning our tactics. The real assault is still coming." Mitchell nodded grimly. He had come to the same conclusion. "What do you recommend, Captain?" "We take the fight to them. They want to fight underground? Fine. But we fight on our terms, not theirs." Within hours, the human expeditionary force had reorganized into something that no Zephyrian could have imagined and no HFY could have prepared for. Instead of maintaining defensive positions on the surface, they began systematic penetration of the underground tunnel networks. Sergeant Cooper led the first tunnel assault team, equipped with explosives, close-quarters weapons, and portable atmospheric processors. The HFY tunnels were impressive feats of biological engineering. Perfectly circular, smooth-walled, and interconnected in a complex network that extended for kilometers beneath the planet's surface. "It's like a damn ant farm down here," Cooper reported as his team advanced through the tunnels. "Multiple levels, connecting passages, what might be storage chambers or nurseries. Any contacts?" Colonel Mitchell asked from the surface command post. "Negative so far, but we're finding evidence of recent activity. Shed carapace fragments, organic residue from their weapons, claw marks in the tunnel walls." As Cooper's team advanced deeper into the tunnel system, they began to understand the true scope of the HFY operation. This wasn't a simple predatory attack. It was a carefully planned invasion that had been months or possibly years in preparation. "Colonel, you need to see this." Cooper's voice crackled through the communications array. "I'm transmitting video now." The images that appeared on the command post displays showed a vast underground chamber, easily the size of a football stadium, filled with what could only be described as military equipment. Organic structures that appeared to be weapons manufacturing facilities, storage areas filled with the bioprojiles they used as ammunition, and in the center of it all, something that made every human who saw it instinctively reach for their weapons. "Is that what I think it is?" Mitchell asked quietly. "If you think it's an egg chamber containing several thousand HFY larvae," Cooper replied, "then yes, sir, that's exactly what it is." The implications were staggering. The HFY weren't just attacking the Zephyrian mining operation. They were establishing a breeding colony. Left unchecked, they would eventually overrun the entire planet. Admiral Harrison's voice came through the communications network with the authority of final command decision. "All units, this is command. We have confirmed that the HFY represent an invasion force establishing a permanent colony on this world. Our mission parameters have changed. We are no longer providing defensive assistance. We are conducting a counter-invasion." The order that followed was simple and comprehensive. Exterminate the HFY presence on Kepler 442b. What followed was not a battle. It was a demonstration of what 3 billion years of evolution on a death world could produce when applied to military operations. The humans didn't simply fight the HFY, they systematically dismantled their entire civilization. Tunnel networks that had taken months to construct were collapsed with precisely placed explosives. Breeding chambers were sterilized with incendiary weapons that burned at temperatures exceeding anything the HFY had ever encountered. Weapon manufacturing facilities were destroyed by demolition teams that moved through the underground complex like they owned it. Captain Santos led one of the deep penetration teams, advancing through tunnel systems that extended nearly 3 kilometers beneath the planet's surface. Her team moved with the confidence of people who had trained for exactly this kind of warfare in environments far more hostile than anything an alien planet could produce. "Movement ahead," Private Chen reported, his weapon trained on a junction in the tunnel system. Multiple contacts, range 50 meters. The HFY that emerged from the side passages moved with desperate aggression, their organic weapons firing continuously as they charged the human position. But they were fighting in confined spaces against an enemy that had evolved for exactly this kind of combat. Santos and her team responded with the mechanical precision of predators who had learned their trade in environments where hesitation meant death. The engagement lasted less than 30 seconds and ended with 6 dead HFY and 0 human casualties. "Sector 7 clear," Santos reported. "Moving to the next level." Above ground, Director Veltar watched the systematic destruction of an invasion force that had seemed unstoppable just days before. Human teams emerged periodically from the tunnel networks to report objectives completed, areas secured, threats eliminated. The efficiency was terrifying and beautiful at the same time. "Admiral," he said to Harrison as they watched the tactical displays update with each cleared sector, "I must ask, is this normal for your species, this level of effectiveness in warfare?" Harrison considered the question carefully. "Director, what you're seeing is not exceptional by human standards. These are good soldiers, well trained and experienced, but they're not our best. Our best are handling more important assignments back home." Veltar's eyes widened. "More important than first contact with alien civilization?" "Director," Harrison replied, "you called for military assistance because you were facing extinction. From our perspective, this is a rescue operation. Our real military assets are reserved for threats to human civilization itself." The implications of that statement hung in the air as they watched human forces complete their systematic destruction of the HFY invasion. By the end of the third day, the tunnels were cleared, the breeding chambers were destroyed, and the HFY presence on Kepler 442b had been completely eliminated. The cost to the humans was 23 wounded and 0 dead. The cost to the HFY was extinction on a planetary scale. The aftermath was handled with the same methodical efficiency as the military operation. Human engineering teams helped the Zephyrians restore power to their facilities. Medical teams treated Zephyrian wounded with equipment and techniques that seemed miraculous to aliens who had never faced large-scale trauma medicine. Construction teams began repairs on the damaged mining installations. And throughout it all, Director Veltar and his people watched the humans work with the growing realization that they had just witnessed something unprecedented in galactic history. "Admiral," Veltar said as they toured one of the restored mining facilities, "I need to understand something. Your people traveled across interstellar distances to help complete strangers, faced an unknown alien threat, and succeeded beyond all possible expectations. Why?" Harrison paused in his inspection of the trilithium processing equipment. "Director, you sent out a distress call. Someone was in trouble, and they asked for help. That's all the reason humans need. But the cost, the risk. Director, humans have a saying, 'No one left behind.' It doesn't just apply to other humans. Anyone who calls for help becomes our responsibility until the threat is eliminated." As the human expeditionary force prepared to return to Earth, they left behind something that would change the galaxy forever. The Zephyrians had not only survived, they had been introduced to the concept of humanity. Within weeks, word of what had happened on Kepler 442b began to spread through galactic civilization. A previously unknown species had responded to a desperate plea for help, traveled across interstellar distances, and eliminated an alien threat that had seemed unstoppable. The payment in trilithium was delivered as promised, but both sides understood that something far more valuable had been exchanged. The galaxy had discovered humanity, and humanity had announced itself in the most unmistakable way possible, by answering a call for help with overwhelming force applied with surgical precision. Director Veltar stood at the observation deck of his restored facility, watching the human ships prepare to depart. In his hands, he held a communication device that Admiral Harrison had given him, a direct link to Earth's military command structure. "If you ever need help again," Harrison had told him, "use this. Humans don't abandon their friends." As the human fleet jumped to hyperspace, Veltar activated his facility's long-range communications array and began composing a message that would be transmitted to every civilized world in known space. The message was simple: humanity had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same. In the depths of space, other civilizations were already receiving reports of the events on Kepler 442b. Some reacted with curiosity, others with concern, and a few with something approaching fear. A species that could eliminate an apex predator invasion force with minimal casualties while simultaneously providing humanitarian aid was not something that fit into any existing diplomatic or military frameworks. But on Earth, as the expeditionary force returned home, the reaction was much simpler. They had answered a call for help, protected those who couldn't protect themselves, and made it clear to the galaxy that humanity was not to be trifled with. It was, Admiral Harrison reflected, as he watched Earth grow larger on the main display, exactly what humans did best. They had found their place in the galaxy not through diplomacy or trade or cultural exchange, but by doing what they had always done: protecting those who needed protection and eliminating threats to those under their care. The galaxy had called for reinforcements. They had gotten Deathworlders. And nothing would ever be the same.